Hi there, Cheryl Lampard here. I'm just coming in a moment early because I just want to make sure that things are working okay. So let me just see, because I want to be able to see you and see what you can see. Let's see. Yes, I think this is coming live. Oh, I got to put my microphone on. Sorry. You'd think we'd never done this before, wouldn't you? Okay, it's 7 o'clock now. So I think I'm just checking here to make sure I can see what you're going to be able to. Oh, we've got sound though, which I don't want. Okay, that's all good though. I can see the screen now. So if somebody could let me know that you can hear me, that would be wonderful. We are at 7 o'clock now, so I will start. If somebody can just let me know, that would be fantastic. I'm going to keep going and I'll assume that you can hear until somebody tells me otherwise. Okay, so welcome indeed to Knitting Matters. This is season 2, episode 20. I'm Cheryl Lampard of Style Matters International, and I'm an image consultant. But throughout my life, I've had my two passions have been sewing and knitting. And knitting in particular is just wonderful for me. It's my therapy, it's my relaxation. I also have had the great joy of being the owner of a yarn store in Brighton, England many years ago. And one of the joys of that, apart from being surrounded by all that fabulous yarn, is that you get to teach people how to knit. And it's a great joy to be able to teach people how to knit all these years later, albeit via a different platform. And you know, I think I enjoy it even more now because I can reach out to more people and introduce them to this wonderful fibre art that is knitting. Oh, and I can see Jill and Dawn and Barbara on. Hi, thank you so much for joining. I really do appreciate you joining and taking your time to watch Knitting Matters, whether you're watching live or the replay later. So, and I will try and say hello when the names pop up. It should be a bit easier this time. If I miss you, forgive me, but if I can see your comments or if you have any questions, I'll try and answer them as we go along. I can only see so much while that's going on. Let me see what I can see now. Anyway, hopefully if there's any comments, I'll be able to see them. Right, okay. The camera's pointing me to do something. Okay, let me just see if I can get this up on the iPad. For some reason, nope, it's not working on the iPad, but I can see it on the phone, so that's great. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to ask the camera to move to the tabletop and then we will get going. So today, I have one little sample for you today because all the fun is going to be where the action is, which will be me showing you about double knitting. So what do I mean by double knitting? Well, I don't mean double knitting as yarn weight. That's a very familiar yarn weight to anyone in the UK and Canada. What I'm doing is talking about the technique of double knitting, specifically double knitting with 2 colours. So this is a sample of double knitting. It's a 2-layer fabric. It's a fabric that's created at the same time, and it's using only 1 pair of needles or a circular. There's not stranded knitting, there's no floats, there's no yarn to carry along the rows. The wrong sides are hidden and the right sides face outwards. The public side is what we call that. When the yarn faces outwards, the side that you see is the public side. There's no wrong side, so the fabric is reversible because the wrong sides are in the middle. And if you see here, you can actually see the 2 layers are pulling apart. They're only connected at the sides, and in this case they're connected at the bottom and the top because that's where we've cast on and cast bound off. But otherwise there's no, you know, there's this lovely squishy pillow-like fabric in the middle. Now, many of you will have seen double knitting with lots of patterns, and indeed this technique really lends itself to colour knitting. It's often seen with great big patterns on large motifs placed far apart or blocks of colour throughout, because you don't have to twist the yarns as you do in intarsia. Now, in season 1, I demonstrated buttonhole bands using double knitting technique in 1 colour. I don't have that sample here as I'm not in my studio in Florida. Oh, I see Carla Agnell is watching. Thank you for joining us, Carla. I don't have that sample here because I'm not in my studio, but if you want to remind yourself of that technique, it's season 1, episode 35. It's on the Knit and Matters Facebook page under videos, or the Knit and Matters YouTube channel, and you'll see it there, season 1, episode 35. However, don't get too focused on that technique for a single color, because the technique for 2-color double knitting is a little bit different than for 1 color. And I'm going to show you in a minute how we cast on. This is my cast on edge here, and as you can see, I think that's really pretty. It's almost like a sort of plaited, braided effect. And I should say at this point, there's many different ways of casting on with 2-color knitting. There's actually quite a few different ways of doing the technique. So the fact remains that you're making a 2-layer fabric and with 1 pair of needles. But oh, Maureen Haynes, thank you for joining in. Great to see you. Thank you. So we're going to do this cast on, and I picked this particular one because I think it's easier if you've never done 2-color double knitting before, and it does give a really pretty bottom edge. You can do invisible cast ons, you can do various other cast ons, but I picked this one because I think it's kind of easier. And Maria Santos is watching. Thank you for joining us. So I'm going to show you how to do this cast on, then I'm going to show you how to do the knitting, and that's all we're doing today because it does take a bit of practice, this technique. It's not difficult, but we're going to do it slowly, step by step, so you really have a chance to see what's happening. I am not going to do a design in the middle of this today. We can do that another day, but I want to get you started on just the principle of double knitting so that you get the feel of it. And then I think doing a design later will come a bit easier. Okay, so there's a few things here. We always need an even number of stitches, and double knitting is always worked in pairs of stitches, 1 in each color, alternating across the row. So I'm going to start now. I'm going to take my 2 colors. I'm just going to ask the camera to move slightly so that I'm not bumping it with my shoulder. That's great, thank you. So what we do here, we're going to do a long tail cast on. Let me get some yarn here. I'm going to do a long tail cast on. I'm going to just do 10 stitches here. You always work in pairs on this one. So I'm probably going to cast on more than I need. I'm going to make a slip knot in both colors, and I'm going to put them both on my right hand needle. So I'm just going to estimate the number, the length that I need for my long tail cast on. Okay, so this one's going on second. So I've got, as you can see, I've got, just give myself a bit of yarn here. Oh, sorry, cameraman's helping me by pulling the yarn, but it's gone right at the other end here. Now what I want here is my 2 tails in front of me, at the front. Okay, so what I do now, I don't need this needle for a moment. I'm going to sort of separate these lengths here, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to cast on my 10 stitches. So you can see here my blue, I call it blue, turquoise, whatever it is, aqua, we'll call it blue for now. You usually work with contrast yarns, so these are my contrasts. So my blue yarn, I'm going to bring through, and I want the 2 parts of the yarn. So I've got my long tail here, I've got the yarn that's connected to my ball of yarn here. I'm pulling that through the white strands, okay? So I'm going to cast on 1 stitch now with the blue. Now I'm going to pull my white yarn in between the 2 tails of the blue yarn, okay? And I'm going to cast on 1 stitch in white. So I've got 4 stitches on my needle now. I need another blue one. So I bring the blue yarn forward between the 2 strands of the white yarn. I cast on another stitch there. I'm now going to bring my white yarn through between the two strands of the blue. Okay, you can see that already forming, that sort of braid forming. So I've got 2, 4, 6. I'm always going to work in pairs. So my next colour is the blue again. Cast that on. Now I need to go back to the white, pulling that through. Oh, Dawn, hi. And Barbara, hi. 2, 4, 6, 8. 2 more. I'm going to bring my blue forward between the two strands, and then my white through between the two blue strands. Okay. Two, 4, 6, 8, 10. I've got 10 now. Okay. I'm just going to cut my very long tails off. Now, obviously, you would continue doing the amount of stitches that you need. Now, before I actually start knitting here, there's a couple of things that it's really important that you understand about double knit. So you can see here how my little braided cast on appears. Okay. And I think that's really quite a simple cast on. Once you get the hang of that, it's really quite simple. So what you have to understand now about double knitting is that every stitch is part of a pair. We're not knitting them together. Some methods of double knitting knit the first pair and the second pair together. We're not going to be doing that. But the principle is you treat them as pairs. And every pair is knit, then purl. Never purl, then knit. It's always knit, then purl, knit, purl, and so on. Each pair contains obviously one stitch of each colour. You can see that here. And both yarns travel together, always. And you'll see what I mean as we go along. Although you're only ever working with one yarn, one colour at a time. And that will become clearer as we go along. So I'm going to start. I'm just going to ask the camera to move back because I need to move my hands now. So if you could just go over my shoulder a bit because I'm going to need to move the needles, that would be great. So for the first stitch of the pair, we're going to hold both yarns to the back. I'm going to knit with the first colour that's on my needle. So I'm going to knit, the first colour is white, I'm going to knit with the one yarn, I'm going to knit with the white, and now I'm going to bring both yarns forward, okay? I'm going to bring them towards me because I'm now going to purl the blue. So I take the blue yarn and I purl that. I now have to take both yarns back to the back of the knitting because I've got a white stitch in front of me. So I need to knit with the white stitch, with the white yarn. I'm going to bring them both forward. I'm going to purl with my blue yarn. I'm going to take both yarns back. That's what we mean by traveling together. They're traveling together. So that's my white stitch I do next. So I'm going to knit that one with my white yarn. I'm going to bring both yarns forward. I'm going to be purling my blue stitch, back again, knit my white stitch with the white yarn, bring it forward towards me, purl with my blue, take that to the back, knit with my white, bring that forward. Okay. Actually, sorry, I'm going to go back one stitch. So I do that until I get to the two last stitches, okay? Now, if I'd have carried on knitting, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. But what you'll find is that sometimes the edge stitches get a bit sloppy. They get a bit loose. And this is a way that stops that happening. So it's not the end of the world if you do the knit and purl to the end. But this is a better way of doing it. So I'm at my last two stitches. Now with my yarns at the back, I slip the next stitch purlwise. I don't knit it. I don't work it. I slip it purlwise. Now I bring the yarns forward and I slip this last stitch purlwise through the back. So this last stitch is slipped through the back as if I'm going to do a purl stitch through the back of the loop. And I take it off the needle. Okay, now I'm going to turn my work. This will become, we're going to do these rows a few more times and you'll see what goes on. Okay, now one of the things that I need to do now, so that remember I said here the work is connected at the side. To do that, you need to twist the yarns. So I'm going to be working now with my blue yarn again. So I need to just twist those. So although we're not twisting yarn like we would when we're changing colours in tarsia, the principle is the same. If we don't twist them, we're going to get a hole at the side. Or rather, we're going to get an unclosed side edge. Not the end of the world, it can be stitched up afterwards, but the whole point of double knitting is that you kind of do this together. So I'm going to do a few more rows and then I shall show you how to bind off. Okay, so I've twisted my yarns. I'm going to knit again with my blue yarn. I'm going to bring them both forward. Don't worry about this white yarn here. It's not connected to this one, but it's fine. It's already been twisted round this bit. This is the one that we were worried about because that's the one I'm starting off on. Okay, so I purl that one. I take them both back. I'm knitting this one. I'm bringing my yarns forward. I'm purling my white stitch now. I'm knitting my blue. I'm bringing that forward. I'm purling my white stitch. I am knitting my blue. I am bringing that forward to purl my white stitch, and I'm going to stop 2 stitches from the end again. With the yarns at the back, I'm going to slip the next stitch purlwise. Then I bring my yarn forward and I'm going to slip this one, sorry, I've got to get the needle off, purlwise, as if I'm going to purl through the back, as I slip it like that. So I'll do a couple more rows and then I'll show you how we bind off. So I think it's easier to start doing double knitting just with, as a practice thing, just with, you know, a 2-color fabric, because once we start doing patterns, you'll be familiar with the technique, so it's not quite so confusing. So, make sure I start with the right color. So whatever is first on your needle is the color that you start with, and that's always going to be a knit stitch. So remember, I've got to twist my yarns. Make sure I'm not leaving them so I get an open side. I don't want an open side. Now there might be times, depending on your pattern, that you do want an open side, and your pattern will tell you that. Now I bring both my yarns forward. I'm going to purl with the blue, knit with the white, and again, like so much in knitting, you're going to get into a really nice rhythm with this in due course. How are we doing for time? Okay, we're doing good for time. Knit, bring my 2 yarns forward. I'll just do a couple more rows and then we will bind off. Purl, yarns to the back, knit, yarns forward. If you find your tension is getting a bit loose, and that sometimes happens with double knitting, I'll show you on the next row a little trick to just help with that. I'm at my last 2 stitches now, so I need to take the yarn to the back. I slip the next stitch purlwise, I bring this forward, and I slip this one purlwise through the back. And you can see our double knitting is forming nicely. So that's a little bit loopy there. I'm not too worried about that. I can tighten that off. And sometimes when you come to finish your work, you can always untie that slip knot and just weave that in. If you don't like knots, you can just untie that slip knot and weave that in, and then you can tighten this little fellow that's a bit loose there up at the same time. So let's do another row. I'm going to start now with my blue yarn. So I've got to make sure I twist that round. Sorry, wrong way round. I need to twist that around the white. So we do just one twist. I'm going to knit that. I bring both my yarns forward. I'm going to purl that. Both the yarns at the back. I don't know if we can see. If I just, you can sort of see now, if I get my little pointy needle here, you can actually see the gap between the two fabrics, the wrong sides, the purl sides of my stockinette stitch. You can just see there's a little gap there, and that's what we're building up, this sort of pillowy, sort of tubular effect almost. That's what we're building up. That only changes if you start doing the sort of reversible design. We're not doing that today. So that's why we move the yarns backwards and forwards. If you perchance make a mistake and purl one of these, it's not the end of the world in a sample, but you just won't be able to pull the two fabrics apart in the same way. So, you know, sometimes we do that by mistake, and it's actually a good thing because that's how we learn. So I bring both my yarns forward now. I have a white stitch to purl. I bring them to the back. I have a blue stitch to knit. Purl, bring my yarns forward. I have a white stitch to purl. Bring my yarns back. I have a knit stitch to knit, a blue stitch to knit. And in many patterns, you'll find that they'll tell you to knit. They'll call the yarns A and B, depending on whether they're light or dark. You can decide which you want to use first. I do find it easier. For me, A to me is always the lighter colour, B is the darker colour. Sometimes I find it hard to get my head around when that's reversed in a pattern, or they call it differently. But you can always write on your pattern what your colours are. Okay, I'm at my last two stitches again. So my yarn is at the back. I need to slip that. Oh, I was going to show you how to tighten up I'll do another row and show you. So I've slipped that. I slip that purlwise. I bring that forward. Then I slip that again purlwise, but through the back. And on this row, I will actually show you how to just tighten that up as we go. So I'm knitting white now. I need to just twist my stitches, twist my yarns. I'm knitting. I'm bringing that forward. Now, so if you feel that as you go along your tension is a little bit loose, what you can do is just pull that up before you do the purls, because the purl often is the thing that the yarn's got to travel a bit more to do the stitch. And so it's the purl stitch that's making the fabric on the back side, if you will, on the side that's away from you. So if you just give that a little tug before you do, actually before you do any of the stitches, I do, but especially before you do the purl, that can help a little bit. Don't worry about it to start with. There's enough to think about while you're doing this as we go along, but I would just give that a little tug. So you're just kind of lifting that purl bump up a little bit. There's purl bump on the needle. Before you bring that forward, you're just gonna give it a little tug, but don't worry about it too much. It's just one of those tips I've found, that if my tension is a little loose when I do double knitting, because we don't want to make it too tight, and in our efforts not to make it too tight, what have I done here? Hang on, what's happened here? I seem to have, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, I've picked up a stitch. Okay, I've done something crazy there. I'm just going to drop that because I need to have I've done something wrong here. Oh, anyway, I'm carrying on. I have done something wrong. I've dropped the wrong stitch, I think. I'm not sure what I've done. So I'm not going to fuss about it now because I want to show you how to cast off in a second. So I'm going to, hang on, let me see where I've gone wrong. And that's bothering me now. We've got time. I want to see where I went wrong there. Okay, I was so busy talking about how to make sure your tension is okay. I'm just going to work backwards because I've done something wrong there and I don't like leaving it like that. So these were my 2 unknitted stitches at the end. Let's work back. Let me work back. There's something gone wrong here. Okay, I've dropped a stitch somewhere. All right, I'm not going to bother you with that because I've dropped it. I just want to show you how to bind off. Let's pretend I haven't dropped a stitch. 2, 4, 6, 8. Oh, there we go. There we are. Whatever I did, I've remedied it. Look at that. Huh. Okay, I did something silly there. So I just want to show you how to cast off. Again, there's many different ways here of binding off. I've just picked one of the simplest ways here, okay? So I'm going to just, for the first 2 stitches, I'm going to, with both strands in my right hand, I'm going to knit the first 2 stitches together, okay? Then I'm using the same color as the next stitch, which is a white yarn. I'm going to bring that forward. Oh, I'm going to knit that actually, because I've already lost a stitch, haven't I? Then I'm going to do exactly as we ordinarily would bind off. Now I'm going to bring only the blue yarn forward this time, because we're binding off. We're not trying to keep the 2 fabrics apart. I purled that stitch. Now I'm going to bring that past that stitch that's on the needle over the one that I've just knitted. So take that back. Now I'm going to knit with whatever yarn color is next on the needle, and it's a knit stitch. And again, I'm going to follow whether it's a knit or a purl. I'm going to knit that. I'm going to pass this stitch over it. Okay. I've got a blue purl stitch next. Okay, and I'm going to pass that stitch over. Exactly as you would in any bind off. But this sort of matches what we did for the cast on. You're sort of going to get that braided effect, okay? I bring my blue yarn forward because I'm going to purl. I pass that over, whoops, pass that over. Then I'm at the last 2 stitches, and with my last 2 stitches, I'm just going to knit them together and pass those 2 stitches over, okay? Now that's a real scrappy little bit of knitting, I know, but it gives you the principles of what we've done to show you how to do double knitting, okay? So I'm going to ask the camera to move back to me. I really hope you enjoyed that demonstration. If you've got any questions, and you see, you know, even if you, as long as you know that your 2 stitches are following, they're in pairs. So when I realized that I'd made a mistake there, or I'd dropped a stitch, or I'd got an extra stitch, that sometimes happens. You need to sort of figure out why that is, because if you don't, your pattern's going to be really messed up. I wasn't going to bother with that because we were binding off, but you know, I don't like to leave things when I don't know what I've done. Anyway, so just remember, with double knitting, you always need an even number of stitches. If I didn't say that, my apologies. You need an even number of stitches. So whether it's 30 stitches, 10 stitches, whatever it might be, it's got to be an even number. You're working in pairs, although you're knitting each stitch at the same, one at a time, and you're alternating the colors. As long as you have that in your head, then that's really helpful. So when you see a knit stitch, you knit it in the color that it's already on the needle, okay? And if it's a purl, it's a purl. And you just bring those 2 strands of yarn, travel with each other at the same time, backwards and forwards. That's really all there is to it. I really hope that was helpful to you. And I'd love you to try double knitting and let me know how you get on with it. Well, perhaps next week we'll do something a bit more complex, and we'll start doing some pattern work with it. And then we'll follow a charted pattern. I think that might be a good thing to do next week. But for any other suggestions or things that you'd like to see me demonstrate in Knit and Badges, please let me know. That's what the page is for, and I'd love to hear your suggestions. If you want to learn new techniques, let me know what they are. As always, this episode and all other episodes of Knitted Matters are uploaded afterwards to our Facebook page. If you want to see replays, they are under the videos tab at the top of the page. They're also uploaded afterwards to our YouTube channel, Knitted Matters YouTube channel, and there you can see the whole playlist. So remember, if you want to see how I did the buttonhole bands last season, that's season 1, episode 35. This is season 2, episode 20, and this was 2-color double knitting. So I hope you enjoyed that. I look forward to seeing you again next week. In the meantime, stay well, stay safe, and stay knitting. Bye for now.